especially when it freezes out there. Oh,
Okay, according to my iPad, it's 8 o'clock, and I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Land and Water on Monday, the 7th of December. It's also anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Yes, great.
I had to remember that. I had to go up to the town hall and lower the flag.
Oh.
So having said that, this meeting and all other meetings of this committee are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted, given to the media in accordance with Wisconsin statutes, so that the citizenry may be aware of time, place, and agenda of this meeting. Roll call will indicate that all members are present. And good morning, Bob. He's on Zoom.
Morning. Morning.
Boy, you're up and early today.
Yep.
You have in front of you for your pleasure the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
I would second that.
Okay, we do have a second. Any further discussion on the agenda? Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Again, we do have the minutes from the November 9th.
I would move that we review, we approve them.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Jim? Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes from November 9th. Any further discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, I'll call that question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried. Under the next item is public comment. I'm not sure from a public comment, does anybody else have anything to say? Supposed to be present, are they? They want to speak? The only thing I was going to mention here under public comment, and I think, Brian, did you get the letter out to everybody?
Did I send this out to
Yes,
everybody?
yes,
Yeah, I did.
yeah.
Okay.
Lebanon Swamp.
I guess I just want to put it under public comment so that the individual realizes that, you know, we all looked at it and talked about it, and Brian might have a few more comments on this ahead of time. It's also in your district.
Our township had
And,
discussed that about 3-4 months ago. It was an issue at the time. There was a beaver dam on Bealo Road and it was blocking the culverts. Talked to the individual that owned that land, it was Mark Cable. He didn't want to remove the beavers. He was hoping that, or he didn't want to kill the beavers. So he hoped that if he just cleaned the culvert pipes out on a daily basis, the water being down would deter the beavers from hanging around. So he had done that for a month and a half, 2 months. The water table finally dropped and it was lower. Then all of a sudden we've gotten the last 2 rains where maybe during the deer hunting season it went up. So this Mr. Rogalski maybe hadn't been out there during that period of time. So he has been keeping those culverts cleaned. He's got 3 of them across the little dike that he's got, and he's been keeping that cleaned out. And so far, the water's been staying down in that area now. So it did come up for a while during the deer hunting season because of the high rains or the heavy rains, but now it's back down again. So we addressed it at our township, and they were happy with it so far.
That does drain into Mouse Creek there.
Mouse Creek? I think it's Deer
No.
Creek or Beaver.
No, Mouse Creek runs across Old.
It goes both directions. Some goes to Mouse Creek to the southwest and most of it goes to Maple Creek to the
East.
east.
And some goes to the west. I don't know where that drains over there. Across Old.
Well, I think most of it would go to Mouse Creek.
Yeah.
But I know my nephew owns land on Mouse Creek and he says that creek flows down from what it used to be is. And the water table's high. So
Yeah.
I think there is an issue over there.
Yeah, there
It could
was.
be something, could be not intentional, but I do know how people are.
This guy here, he's just kind of
I'm gonna throw that out there.
an animal lover, and well, he's a hunter, and he doesn't feel just to kill animals for no reason is a reason to kill them. So, and he said he was a trapper for years. There is another individual that owns land to the east of that. He lives over in the Green Bay area. I can't remember what his name is, but he was willing to do whatever it took to get rid of the animals because the road itself was starting to settle out from being underwater so much that the shoulders were starting to break off. So we brought that up as a main issue, and then other landowners came forward that they couldn't even use their land, that they had planted trees 3-4 years ago and they're all dying off. So talked to the individuals and they were very cooperative. So if this Mr. Rogalski would go out there now, he would most likely see that the water is down. I'm not sure where his land is on that, in the Lebanon swamp there, but
Kind of up on the northwest edge.
okay. So I don't know if he maybe even has obstructions in his creek that are maybe holding water back also, but the eastern end of it now is draining much better.
Well, and he alluded to quite a few of the things you commented about it. He alluded to maybe it had to do with County Trunk T when they redid the road to Rat, to Muskrat.
Well, ultimately, there's not a lot we can do about it. There's not much under our jurisdiction unless there was a problem that a best management practice could help cure. I did forward it on to about 3 or 4 folks in DNR that, you know, they would have some jurisdiction, and our streams biologist did call Mr. Rogalski and talk to him. So he said maybe in the spring he would consider walking it. But, you know, their first reply is that the last 3 years have been wet. Everything's wet. So
I talked to an individual from the DNR they've got a nuisance ordinance, and the DNR can go and take these animals out if they become a nuisance for landowners, trees or whatever it might be, and for the public roadway, so they can remove the animals. But so far, this Mr. Cable has been taking care of the issue. So right now the township of Lebanon seems to be happy with them.
Well, I just want to comment on.
Yep.
Is that Dowd Road that runs up on the south side of the swamp? Or what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dowd was underwater this year. That's
Yeah, and-
because the water table was so high.
Yeah, and I'm aware that on the south side of the road, that I used to rabbit hunt that, grouse hunt that, and that's flooded. So and that has no drainage out. So that's telling me the water table is up there,
Mhm.
but I just didn't know if maybe on a property west end. Or,
That road was underwater since I think Christmas last year. So then late summer, they went and they added, I don't know how many loads of gravel to get it 6 to 8 inches above the water because they just couldn't get rid of the water. They had talked about pumping the water out. Well, just going to come back in. So that was their fix for it, was to raise the road up. And now the water is going down. I've got a little pond at my place, or a pit, sand pit, and I've got one little corner that held water. Well, the last couple of years, it's been 3.5, 4 feet higher than normal. It's finally starting to go down, but it's still probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet higher than it normally is this time of year. So the water table is still up there quite a bit higher than it has been for several years. So
Okay, I guess we
addressed it.
Yep. Thank you for your input. Okay, I guess agency report, Lisa?
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Hear you?
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so I guess this goes without saying, but our office is still closed to the public. Nothing has changed since the last meeting. NRCS still has limited staff. Derek and I are switching off. So we're trying to make do that way. Our eQuip sign up ended on November 20th. We had a pretty good sign up. We had 41 applications. They range anywhere from forestry practices all the way up to big waste storage practices. So we've got, again, like usual, a really nice variety of applications. Still a lot of interest in cover crops, soil health practices, and wetland restorations, wildlife scrapes, that kind of thing. So good healthy sign up, considering we can't meet with a lot of people like we usually do, but I think it's going to be good. Under the umbrella of eQuip, which is a pretty broad program, there's different funding sources, And one funding source we're actually going to work with this year for the first time is the Source Water Protection Fund. And that is Congress allocated a certain amount of money to go towards groundwater protection practices. And it's not a big change because we've always had groundwater as one of our main resource concerns we can address. But this time they addressed specific watersheds, and the Wapaka River watershed is on the list of source water protection watersheds. So this year we do have one big project that's planned in the Wapaka River watershed. So it's kind of nice because it opens up additional funding for people, especially for this project since it's a big farmstead project, and farmstead projects are typically statewide competition. And because we're able to also tap into the Source Water Protection Fund, we should be able to increase this person's chances of getting funding and getting the project done. So hopefully that'll work out to everyone's benefit. As far as projects completed since the last meeting and paid for, we had 6 more farms that completed their cover crops. And most of these folks planted them in October, but we'd like to wait till the cover crops germinate so we can check the populations and make sure it was a successful planting. The good thing about those cover crops is actually over half of those folks have done cover crops for the very first time this year. So we have a lot of newcomers that are learning how to do them, starting to see the benefits of cover crops. So it's nice to see that. We had a couple grazing projects that were completed, winter waterers for folks that like to graze in the winter, do bale grazing. I should send you a picture of that for the next meeting so you know what I'm talking about. We had some fencing completed, some grazing for the year completed, and then thanks to your department, we finished a pretty good size water and sediment control basin project that is going to keep a lot of sediment out of the Little Wolf River. So that was a good one. We have, I don't think I've talked about this program very much in the past, but we still have a wetland restoration easement program. It used to be more popular than it is now, but it's basically folks can restore large wetlands, and in turn, they protect the land for either 30 years or a permanent easement. And if they go with the permanent easement option, the U.S. government basically gives them the fair market value of the land in exchange for that easement. So it's sort of similar to the PACE program that you used to have, only it's specifically targets large wetland restorations. So we do have one person who might be interested in that, and that's the first person we've had interested in that program for probably about 10 years. So I believe Greg and Dan, Greg, if you're there, you can chime in. You guys are going to do a little bit more of an investigative survey out there so we can see what the potential is, and possibly get the neighbor in on it too, because the water, if we do restore this wetland, the water is going to flood into a neighbor's property, so we'll have to investigate that. But yeah, it's the first person that's been interested in a long time in that program, so we'll see what happens.
Lisa, question.
Yes.
Lisa, question on that.
Yeah.
The land that would be put in there is strictly the real wetland, or does it encompass acreage around it, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we restore a wetland, we want to always have a buffer area around the water itself to prevent nutrients and sediment from getting into the wetland. So under that program, you could do a 1-to-1 water to buffer ratio. So say we ended up with 10 acres of open water, we could do 10 acres of buffer around that water. And typically we see that down with either prairie grass or, regular farm grasses.
And then a follow-up question. If they're going to be paying for those acreage, I realize that gets put on their title, so it's there for perpetuity probably, or this is 100 years, whatever. But my question would be, do they have to survey that, or do they just go by meets and bounds the best they can?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty extensive process to get it surveyed. They have to do a hazmat investigation. It's got to be reviewed down in Milwaukee at the Department of, oh, I don't know. Anyway, it's about a 1 to 2 year process to get all that taken care of. So another deterrent to the program, I think, because it does take so long. But for people who are really gung-ho and wanting to do some rather large scale wetland restorations and get compensated for it, it's a good deal. And then again, like all of our other programs, when it comes to wildlife habitat, a lot of these areas are just struggling to make crops on them. I mean, I think the last time they harvested that corn off the area we're looking at, I think they got 30 bushel corn or 40 bushel corn. It was pretty bad. So it's an area that's extensively ditched, and this program basically would just put it back to what it was before the ditching went in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that is all I have. We do have a conservation stewardship sign up coming up in 2021. However, I do not have the dates yet, so I will let you know when I hear something. That's all I've got.
Any other questions for Lisa?
Jake is here.
Jake, can you hear us?
Oh, we can't hear you, Jake.
Unmute him.
Yeah, he's not muted on our end. It would show up across his name.
Does that work?
Yeah, there you go.
It wants a microphone that says same as system. I don't like whatever checkbox was in there. This is why I got to retire. I am not technologically in favor of the new way. Let's just put it that way.
You're not the only one.
Yes, anyway, FSA has basically been working on the coronavirus program #2. If you recall, I think last time we talked that I was on camera here. We were on round 1, which was through the spring. They changed the rules, which made different crops as well as different situations available. So starting in September, they came out with round 2. So up to date for Waupaca County, we're pushing over 300 and some applications, and about 400 applications, and we're looking at pushing towards $4 million. That's been given out to the agricultural community on round 2. The program goes through December 11th. I think we did a pretty good job the ladies have as far as outreach to everyone with crops in the county, because starting last week it's slowed down. I got writer's cramp because they make me sign every one of those things, and I go to Waupaca County Tuesdays and Thursdays, and for a month and a half I had stacks on my desk. Now I'm down to 1 or 2 sitting there. So I believe we've done a pretty good job of reaching out to everyone that would be eligible for the program. We've had many of them try to be eligible for the program, but where Lisa was talking about restoring wetlands, they decided that they should drain a few, and that doesn't go with government programs, as you know. So that's kept a few out. So, but that's been the main focus so far. Now, another program as of December 11th that is final, or deadline, I should say, is our dairy margin coverage program. The sign up for that has increased over last year, and I guess as well as it should, because if you've watched the futures, they don't look so good once again for the dairy industry. They are dropping again. So, you know, it was an election year, so of course it's got everything a little messed up. So is as soon as the election's over, you know, it's just kind of historically the prices of commodities in there go up a little bit. A couple months they'll level out again. Usually not to the upper side, as Craig would know for sure. But what happens is in the dairy margin program, the producers buy a margin between the cost of producing 100 pounds of milk and the cost of growing or producing 100 pounds of milk. And that margin has paid for the last few years now. We've paid it quite a bit, unfortunately, for that the margin that the producers purchased. Trying not to get into a whole bunch of numbers and stuff here, but that's been a good program. I don't know how to put it. It's been a good program and a bad all at the same time, because it's like insurance. When you pay, it costs them money. So unfortunately, we've been paying. So anyway, that one comes December 11th. This winter, the ladies will be working mainly on what's known as the ARC PLC program. That's the agricultural risk coverage / price loss coverage program. That's the one that deals with the bases. So I would think most of you are familiar with a base, crop acreage base on your farm, whether it be corn, soybeans, small grains, that type of thing. We have a program that's an income risk type program for that. So depending upon income of the commodities dealing with the base each year, there can be a payment or not. But each year the producers all have to sign up for that. There's a lock-in rate that a few took that locked in for the entire farm bill. Most people did not. So we're contacting them, and that sign up goes into the spring. So basically that's what they'll be working on. We got a little record cleanup going on. And I know there's some people out there, and how should I put this? Landowners, many of them are a little upset, not so much actual farmers, growers. And that is because, Brooke, mainly we've been trying to update our records where there's a lot of idle land out there. They've been calling it cropland. And for example, they've been reporting it as native grass, and they've been getting paid some of this base acreage on it. Well, when you bring up our photos, it's all trees and not planted trees. If you plant trees under a program or purposely plant trees, it's called the old program name cropland. So it qualifies to get base acreage payments on it. But a lot of the wild left go type land where you can see that it could not be farmed due to conventional tillage, we need to take that and call it non-cropland. Well, some of these places that have been vacant for a while, we take it out of cropland, and that affects their base. So we send them nice letters, of which they do not respond very nicely. But facts are the facts. It's kind of the way it is. Non-ag land is non-ag land. So I don't know if any of you were affected by that or heard anybody complaining, but we've gotten a few phone calls on that. So, but other than that, that is pretty much, I know that, and maybe Lisa alluded to it, but it was a dry fall, a dry year here come to the end. As you know, harvesting was good. We had quite a few requests, and I'm trying to, I got 3 counties I'm working with, so I'm not sure, but Wapaka I know had a few farmers that have requested cleaning ditches, digging ditches, and putting in tile. Replacing tile in prior converted fields, new tile, old tile, that kind of thing. So I know that has kept lines of communication busy, if you will, to try to get those things checked out so they can get them done. That was another thing for the fall. So that's about what we've been doing. So
Jake or Lisa, have either of you heard much this particular year with crop insurance? Have people been able to collect anything, or were the yields such that they did not qualify for collection or so forth?
Well, we've with the crop reports and things, we work quite a bit with crop insurance because crop insurance uses our acreage reports mainly as a compliance type mechanism for them. Yields for Wapaka County for 2020 have been excellent, actually, very good. Those strips and everything that you've seen out there in fields as far as crop insurance, most of them are to get appraised to increase their APHs, their actual production history, or for the future when you buy a policy. So it's to up their guarantee. So most of those strips were left to be appraised for to increase their guarantee. So as far as a lot of claims, we have not been requested for our crop reports by hardly any crop adjusters. And usually when it comes fall, we've got a list of requests that crop insurance wants crop reports for all these farms. And we didn't hardly get any this year. So based on that, I would have to say that it's been a very good year for crops this year.
Any other questions anybody from the committee has for Jake or Lisa? Otherwise, thank you and have a good Christmas and New Year.
Yeah, and you as well. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jake. All right, meeting reports. Demo Farm Network management team did not meet in November. There's nothing to say there other than the agronomists continue to work with our farmers. And I guess, was that article you brought in, Jim? Was that Demo Network? Or?
Yeah, it's, Derek is,
Still get a little press out there.
yeah, it's a little press.
In what's otherwise been a crummy year for Demonstration Farm Network. So, Bob, you went to Golden Sands last month. I did not.
I did. And I got misquoted at Golden Sands and I passed that on to you. I don't know what to tell you. The Lake Committee meeting was the usual and all of it was the usual. And I have nothing to really honestly report other than somebody wrote down something I said, which I have no idea what they're even talking about. So we're working on that one.
I sent her an email that I think straightened it out. So
Okay.
the topic Bob was talking about, and I'll just share it so you're aware of it here. I think it was the Riverlands had put out a suggestion that the central Wisconsin counties pass a resolution to have a referendum on their April election about those clean water bills that did not pass last March due to Congress or due to the Senate adjourning before or due to coronavirus. And Washera actually did this and sent it to their committee, and it got shot down. This was their resolution on screen, but basically asking to have a county referendum, and it seems a little extreme, I guess. By all accounts, the Senate and Assembly are going to take up some of these bills this year, and if not, the governor's going to put them in his budget anyway. So I think all of that will get hashed out without. There's just some impatient folks and some of the nonprofits probably. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you that because Washera sent it over, but that was apparently the highlight topic of the meeting Bob went to. So.
Right. Someone just confused Washera County and Waupaca County when reporting it on the minutes.
Oh,
Okay, wildlife damage and abatement claims program. So this is kind of a first time for a few of you members that were new this year. Statutorily, this has been a program that we're tasked with. We were somewhat joyed when one of those bills last March that didn't pass would have been to take this program out of our hands and give it back to DNR statewide through administrative rule. However, that too didn't pass, so we're administering it again in 2021, which I think may be our last year. For those of you that were around a few years, you know that this sometimes gets contentious. There's really two parts of the damage program. you know, we have a lot of deer damage claims, and in Wapaka County, most landowners don't want to open up their land to public hunting, so they just come to us. Greg goes out and does a damage assessment, forwards it to the DNR biologist, and they get issued shooting tags that are non-public. Occasionally, a few of the people want the reimbursement that's available to them for the crop damage through this program, at which point they do have to open up their property to public hunting. And then same thing, Greg does the damage assessment, forwards it on to the DNR, and then that starts into the system for a reimbursement claim. And that's what we're here to discuss today, because statutorily, this committee has to approve the damage claim before it goes to DNR. So, and I think we just got one of these two guys today.
Yeah, yeah. The other one, I haven't had a chance to talk with him, just as busy as fall was. I usually like to go sit down with the landowner, make sure my numbers seem right to them. And I just hadn't had to do that with Larry Bartle, so I'll have that ready for January. But this one I have is for Jim Barnick. So I'm going to just keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
All right. Jim is a grower up near Marion, and he was running soybeans this year. And he's got a particular pothole within his field that he farms around, and the geese, the resident geese this spring just hammered what turned out to be 4 acres in that field. So basically he called me out mid to late summer, said he wanted to get into the program. So I made the assessment. I have to come up and say, at least there's going to be, if there hasn't already been, if the damage keeps going on, there's going to be $1,000 worth of damage. That's the trigger. So then he was able to get shooting tags for the geese, which he could fill himself or distribute to anybody who would want to come out. I put up some scare ribbon just quick to try to see if we could maybe keep them out while the process was rolling. I have guys that call me every spring for scare ribbon along fields. They swear by it. So I said, if you call, I'll come and put it out. I said, when I first did it, I said, I don't know if it's snake oil, but I'll give it a shot. And every spring I get consistent calls from a couple of growers that have me put it up. So they say it's enough to keep the geese off the edges of the field till the crop gets up high enough. So Jim got shooting tags. Then I come out just before harvest, and I have to pull samples in the damaged area and in the undamaged area of the field, assess what the undamaged area is yield wise, and the damaged area, figure out the difference, what was lost in the acreage. So with geese and soybeans, it's pretty easy, because when the geese get into the soybeans, there's nothing left. It isn't like deer where you got to kind of work a little bit harder in the damaged area. It's the good area's got this yield and the bad area is 0. So it makes the math pretty simple. So anyways, and with our new instrument, I was able to GPS completely around the damaged area, and it came out he had 4 acres of loss. Now this is the I don't know if Brian sent you out the actual how I have to go about it, but I'll just run through it quick. In this particular case, Jim had planted 30-inch row.
0, so it makes the math pretty simple. So anyways,
What?
and with our new instrument, I was able to
Stop that.
GPS completely around.
Okay. Jim planted 30-inch rows. So what I have to do is measure out 17 feet 5 inches, which turns out to be 1/1000th of an acre. Yes. So within that 17 feet 5 inches of row, I have to count all the plants. Then I have to harvest the beans off of 4 plants. Count all the beans off of those to get an average of beans per plant. And then you take the beans and put 100 beans in a graduated cylinder. And how many cc's 100 beans makes is it's a bean size factor. So anyways, I have to pull at least 3 samples. I always pull at least 5 because my math, this is what I got. So for Jim's, the average number of plants in that 1,000th of an acre was 131 plants. 88 beans per plant. You multiply those two, divided by a conversion factor of 147. I'm not sure what that conversion factor is. The bean size factor was 0.196. It comes out to be that the yield in the undamaged area was 76 bushels to the acre. I had a guy a few years back, I would get the same type of high numbers. I know what for Wapaka County, we're supposed to average 40 to 45 bushels average. I mean, is that?
Normally, that's what I've heard always.
That's what I've always heard. When I started getting numbers like this years ago on another guy, I called a damage specialist up in Marathon County who has, this is all he does for the northern part of the state. And I said, what am I getting here? Am I doing something wrong? I explained, he said, you get what you get. As long as you're following the formula, you get the numbers you get. That's what it'd come out to be, 76 bushels. So 76 bushels loss per acre on 4 acres comes out to be 304 bushels of loss. So that's my math. So you're approving, I guess, my math, and I guess the committee also by statute sets the price. I happened to go on the Corn Growers website last Friday, and you can type in Wapaka's zip code, and it brought up, you know, the closest buyers. I think Amherst was 1098 and Reedfield was 1107, or vice versa, right in there. So I mean, we're right around that $11 a bushel price. That lean towards you guys. So in that, if it was 11, what was my? I gave you that number. I didn't write it down here. 304 times 11. About 3,300. There's a $500 deductible, so he would be getting about
3,344
minus
500,
so about 2834.
2844.
44. That would be the claim to the DNR for payment.
Question.
Yes.
You said that when they go into this program, the public is then welcomed on their land.
If you're going for the money on that part, yes, it has to be open to the public. That particular animal that you're hunting. So when he got the first shooting tags in the summer before the season is open, he could fill those or he could give them to anybody. But once the goose hunting season is open, he has to allow people on hunt who call. They have to call and say, you know, can I see you're in the program? Can I come out and hunt? And based on the acreage that's in, it's 40 acres there. You can have up to 2 hunters. So, yep.
Did he have anybody or not?
I don't know. I'd have to check.
Did you hear if he took any geese out of there himself?
I'm not.
Well, he would have to fill his tags to be eligible, wouldn't he? Is it like deer?
Well, he's just got to open it up during goose season. isn't
Do you, what do you do? I don't goose hunt. I mean, when you shoot geese now, do you have to register them? Or you just have your bag limit? You don't
Just have a
carry
2-day
'em.
bag limit, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, you don't register them online like deer. So I don't know.
See, in the deer program, if they issue you, say they issue you 10 tags, you're required to fill 40%.
50% in
50%.
45 days and 80% total.
Yeah, you have to meet those fill requirements
Yeah.
to get your compensation too.
So we don't know if he's gotten the quota that he was supposed to.
And that's the part when I send this up to Jake Fries, who's the game manager, and they issue the tags. Usually I've done the field work, looked at the crops, and I don't
If
have
there's
any
a
of the.
requirement for shooting, Jake would have to make that.
Right.
determination.
So
That's met.
if the committee approves this and it turns out that there was tags he had to fill and they weren't filled, the DNR would probably not pay. Even if this committee approved it, they wouldn't pay. So that's their call there. I guess from my thinking has always been, if for whatever reason, let's say you didn't fill the tags and they didn't pay, if there's still a record of the damage to show that there's a history there going down the line.
So like you said, whether he averaged only 60 bushels on the rest of them doesn't make any difference.
Right. It's
I mean,
it's
The formula.
it's the formula, right? I got to follow the form. That's why I take more sense. That I said a few years back, I had that one fella I dealt with year in and year out, and I got numbers that just I said I can't. I don't know. I'm doing everything that the manual says, and I'm getting these wild numbers that I don't think they can grow in Indiana. And yet the math is what it is. And so that's,
What is the opinion of our soybean growers?
yeah, I mean, that's,
Can you hit 70 bushel, Jim, with your sprinkler running?
I don't think I ever have.
yeah.
I mean, my first reaction was, it sounds high, but if it's just a section of the field that wasn't affected by the deer, this year I had spots in the early planted fields that were hitting 70s in the yield monitor, but shit, the first 5 acres around the outside, there was nothing. So when you average that into the whole 45 acres, it averaged 50 something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we've been told that by other growers, that if you would factor out the deer damage that everybody in Wapaka inherently assumes, that you would be more likely to hit those higher yields a lot more often.
It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, at any rate, our role here is just the determination of the loss calculation. The rest of it ends up going to DNR. So.
I just have one other follow-up question.
Yes.
I guess this is the first time as long as I've been on this committee, we came up with geese and well. But is this typical?
I tell you what, it is in my case. I lost
Are
5
you doing
acres
that?
of snap beans.
Oh.
When geese start eating, they're in the spring and they eat it to the ground.
Right to
That
the,
part I would
They do.
understand.
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right
I,
next to my irrigation pond across the street from my house, 5 acres this year of snap beans gone.
yeah,
Right
Yeah.
down to nothing.
yeah. I've seen that 5 acres of soybeans completely gone, just dirt.
Yep.
Where that's the geese make it easy, you know,
Yeah,
the
well,
deer, you gotta work a little harder, but the
Yeah.
geese, you just,
Last year, right next to the Q pit, I had soybeans and there was probably 5 acres easy. And you drive up there on the way to the irrigation pond, there'd be 80, 90 of them and they wouldn't really fly away. They'd just start walking.
Yeah.
Well, they're full.
So I'd like to try.
well, if you
Careful
want,
on
call
leaving
me
the food
in
plot.
the spring, because I think it's the, you know, it's the old ones with the young ones too, when they're
Yeah.
first, before they can fly and take off, so.
Well, I guess we need a motion.
We need a price
And
and a
a price and a
motion.
motion.
So
Need a price. Oh, pick the
Per
price.
bean, yeah, the
Yeah.
cost per,
Well, and that $11 is where the market is right now, and if you're going by today's price, so.
I know, I'd written on a sticky note here when I pulled the sample and I first calculated it back in October, beans were at $9.90 then.
I
I know
say
they're-
that, yeah,
they're-
during harvest, they weren't this high.
Right, so we're at today at 11-ish, so.
That would be a bonus for him if we have to pick today's price.
You have to, I mean, I think you do it at harvest time, wouldn't you?
You could go between the 10 and 11 too, probably.
Yeah,
If you wanted to
You
split,
know,
yeah.
That's up to you.
yeah, if a guy wanted to store his beans and sit on them, it's 3 cents a bushel,
That's a good point too.
so. If you wanna,
I think anything he gets is gonna be a bonus.
Yeah.
So if we go with the 990, and as long as this meets, or as long as he's met the DNR's requirements, I guess I would make that motion that we pay him the 990 with all requirements being made by the DNR of harvesting the geese out of there.
I'll second that.
Discussion, I guess the only comment I would have to the motion basically is that, you know, we don't want to deprive anybody, but then the yield is fairly high too, so I don't feel so bad about it.
No,
You know what I mean?
no,
I think we're fair.
yeah, oh yeah.
Call the question? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
So, 304 at 990. All right. Thank you.
Wasn't there another deduction also when that bear claim came in, whatever it was, a year or two ago, we had a $500 deductible, and then there was another fee for something else, at $30, $40, $50, whatever that was, and.
At the maximum DNR will pay to any one landowner in any given year is $10,000. Once the $500 deductible is automatic. Once the claim gets above $5,000, then they pay 80% of it up to the 10,000.
I thought we even had other additional fees. They're just a couple small ones, but I thought there was one or two other small fees.
No fees, just the 80% kicks
Okay.
in when we're in a
Yeah.
higher territory.
Okay.
And the $10,000 cap.
Okay. thank
Okay,
you.
hey, thank you for your time. See you next month. Everybody have a good Christmas.
You too.
See ya.
Take care, Graham.
Right. Try to, so I sent out last year's fee schedules. Usually our December meeting here, we reapprove these for the following year. So the first one up here is our farmland preservation fee schedule. We haven't changed this since we started. We did add section C in a couple of years ago when we got our first ag enterprise area. That's a kind of a secondary higher level of farmland preservation that actually takes on a contracted easement. So we're, one of the things we always have to be wary of with our fees in statute, it talks about having fees that are justifiable. When Stefan and I first came up with this schedule, we actually looked at what was typical. He has to go up, do an inspection, how far he has to drive. That's kind of where we came up with the first 3 parcel thing, because you got to drive up there, whether it's 1 parcel or 20 parcels. And I guess we're happy with this. We feel it's fair yet. So I would just recommend that we pass this fee on for another year unless you feel differently.
I would make a motion to approve this 2021 fee schedule as printed.
Do you want to do this one at a time? I've got 3 schedules to look at, or you want to do them individually?
Oh, maybe one at a time.
I think in this case, since they're different, let's.
One at a time. All right. So Jim's doing the farm pres fee.
I'll second that.
Second by Bernie. Any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor of this, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried.
Just a side note, this provides us, depending which year we're in, some years have more turnover in FP than others, but anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000 a year in fees that we pull in for this. All right, let's move on to chapter 51 is our manure storage ordinance. So these are permit fees for manure storage, feed leachate storage, waste transfer systems, anything to do with the storage and transfer of manure. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, we passed chapter 51, which replaced chapter 10 in late 2018. So for 2019, we came up with the schedule. I think we put quite a bit of thought into it at the time. And then I believe before last year, we did a little bit of repositioning with the waste storage abandonments. They weren't on there written out like they should have been, and then we exempted the cost share ones because we are actively trying to get people to close up some of these old pits and didn't want to really penalize them for doing so. So here's where we're at. This year we didn't see any new, I take that back. We did have a waste transfer, and we had an abandonment or 2 that were exempt. But our last year or 2, we've been kind of down in waste storage work. I think we'll actually be up a little bit in the next year or 2 because some of Lisa's equip signups for next year were for waste storage again. Surprisingly, we had a couple. So.
My only comment would be, and I don't want to belittle that if somebody goes out of business and it's abandoned, we want to get it cleaned up. But I think there will become a size that 250 isn't, it should maybe by gallon, or you know what I'm saying, Jim? Like,
Sure, a prorated.
maybe a million one should be different than a.
Yep. Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and what I would say to that is, you're likely going to look at an old versus a newer one in that situation.
Right,
And you could be right, I mean, most of the waste storages we build nowadays are 3 million gallons and larger. Because we're, really everybody that's still in business has gotten to a fairly large size. Most of the abandonments that we do are these little dinky,
right.
couple 100,000 gallon pits that have been around for 30, 40 years that weren't built to standard in the first place. If we got to the point where we had to abandon one of these things that we build lately with concrete or plastic, it would be a bigger undertaking.
Oh, yeah.
Than most of the little ones we do. So I mean, that's a legitimate
You want to put a
point.
footnote for next year that,
Well, you can do it now if you want.
or maybe not, who knows?
Your call.
Well, I just can see that coming.
What I would say about the sizes up on top, Dwayne, there's a rhyme or reason to these numbers, this 3.75 million and the 7.5 million. Those are the limitations of our engineering approval. So in-house, our technicians, most of them have approval of 3.75 million gallon structures, either to build them or to get rid of them. When we get above that, we have to go to our engineer in Appleton. And if he gets above 7.5 million, he may have to take that to Madison. So that's one of the reasons that we created those particular ranges. So, and that would, I'm pretty sure those ranges are the same for abandonments too. So, if you get above a 7.5 million gallon abandonment, it may have to be approved by somebody in Appleton or Madison. So if you wanted to pick one of those numbers, one of those slot ranges and say we should charge more.
Do you want to put all three of those slot ranges in there? If it's 7.5 million, you want 1,500 for abandonment and on down?
I don't know if you'd have to do that. I guess my recommendation would be to go with the 3.75 because that's a pretty good number where if we have to abandon something bigger than that, it's going to be a pretty big undertaking. So I don't know if you want to complicate abandonment with 4 different slots or not. But good.
Is there anybody that applies for these that's denied an opportunity to put in a storage unit?
Say that again.
Someone applies, it says all pits and fees shall be received. Now, if someone pays for permit, are they ever denied putting in are they going to be spending $1,500 and then being denied the opportunity?
No, the only thing we would deny them is if they didn't have the proper engineering plan to us prior to construction or deconstruction. Okay. If you're looking at that size, that 7.5 million and on up, it's likely that could be a CAFO, and most of those guys are using private engineers and not our staff to design these things. So, the private engineer has to send us the plan for approval before we issue a permit. And quite honestly, all of them that have been in that scenario to date have been done by one specific private engineer, and they're very good at getting us what we need. So we haven't had any issues, but it's foreseeable. I mean, it could happen.
What are you looking at for anything? Instead of 750, making 1,000 even or something?
Well, I'm just looking at if it's a 7.5 million gallon tank and all of a sudden farming takes a crap here in the upcoming 15, 20 years and you have all these pits out there, are we going to be spending or charging them 750? It's going to cost over 1,500 for the engineering to remove that. So if you had the same levels of $1,500 for 7.5 million and up, and then on down to the 1 million gallon, have those same price ranges. If it's costing that much to design it, it's going to cost that much to deconstruct it.
Well, if they had to pay a private engineer to design, say, a 7.5 million gallon or larger structure,
Your fees.
It costs a lot more than that. That's
Right. That's just their permit. But the county's aspect of what it's going to cost, is $250 going to take care of it, or $800?
Are you talking about
What's it going to cost the county to go in and?
Are you talking about construction or deconstruction?
Deconstruction.
Deconstruction, So there's two things going on. If we're cost sharing it, then we've got a lot of time into making the plan and that stuff. But we're also charging them our cost share fee on the next fee schedule we're gonna look at. So we're getting money out of it through the cost share fee. From a permit standpoint, the only thing we really have to go out and do is take some shots when it's over and some pictures and document it. So the permit part of it is not a lot of work. The creation of the plan, if we're cost sharing it, is a lot of work.
But now when you deconstruct one of these or demolish it, you're gonna be going out there and doing test samples of the soils around it.
No, we're just, all they're required to do is clean it out to native soil. We don't have to test any of that. Again, we have to go out and shoot it in and inspect it and take some pictures. So the permit part of it's not a lot of work. If we have to do the planning, and this goes for construction or deconstruction, there's quite a bit more work in the planning part of it, but we're charging them the fees for the cost share that way. So
I guess as I'm thinking about this, I'm going back to a comment you made earlier about not wanting to penalize somebody for cleaning that up. So if you do wanna have your cutoffs consistent with the abandonment and the gallonage, I don't know, I don't wanna give people an excuse, well, they're just gonna soak me a lot of money, let's just let it be. So if you want to continue with the smaller ones to be exempt, and then the bigger ones that are going to be a little more work figuring it out, just to leave a little incentive out there so that they aren't chicken to at least check into cleaning it up.
But they can't allow them to sit empty, can they?
our ordinance says that they're only allowed to sit for a 2-year period without an inspection from us. If the inspection finds that the structure is in good condition and we can keep it, we'll allow them to keep it. What I would say about that is if it's a newer structure that we likely created or a private engineer created the plan for, probably something in the last 2 or 3 revisions of the 313 standard, the manure pit standard, we would allow them to keep it. Anything older than that wouldn't meet 313 anymore, and we'd probably, we could enforce the closure of it through our ordinance if we wanted to.
I guess I'm thinking that if the pit is watertight and it's been cleaned out, the only hazard left is a safety hazard for the water sitting in there. It's not a pollution hazard.
And the units should be fenced. I mean, there's a fencing requirement in our ordinance as well. So, I mean, they should have been fenced when they were built. If the fence is no longer there, that could be a new requirement of an inspection.
Is there any enforcement on I'm just thinking of these newer ones, because you can make a fish pond almost out of them. But the point is, you could also have little kids drowning them.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand, is there inspection that if water has, a considerable amount of the wet year of water can get in there. Do they have to pump that out by fall every year? Not the way it's set up.
Are you asking about an abandoned unit?
Yeah.
No, I mean, if we would go out and sign off on it, so we're kind of into this scenario with the Adam Spearing's pit right now, one that we built 5 years ago, and now the property's been sold. We've been working with the new owner there to basically clean it out. He's kind of flipping back and forth between abandonment or not, and if we do abandon it, it's about $1.25 million structure, but it was all concrete, new concrete with steel in. Right now, he needs to clean it out because it was an inch or two from overtopping all summer. Summer, you get away with that because you get enough evaporation, it doesn't happen. But by this winter, we've got to have him either pump it down a couple of feet or empty it completely. Now, if he empties it completely, we no longer consider what's in there manure anymore. So then if it fills up and overflows, it's just water, who cares? But what he can't do is empty it 3 feet and then let it fill up and overflow, because that's still manure. I mean, there's still a lot of manure in it. So that's where he's at right now, trying to make a choice over that decision. If he cleans it out completely, we're not gonna go back and re-inspect it. You know, basically, we've certified that it's empty. It's a structure that meets the current standards, so we wouldn't tell him to abandon it. At that point, I wouldn't go back and look at it unless somebody made a complaint of some sort, so.
Has anybody ever made one of those into a swimming pool?
Not that I know of.
I mean, you could, those bigger ones.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what the other popular thing is now is that the cheese plants
They want to store their,
want to store their wastewater in them.
Yeah.
That's been talked about with the Spearing's pit already too. That's what happened with the Rickman pit here this past year, so. Especially with our newer structures that meet all the codes, because the wastewater has a separate code they have to follow, but our newest structures are generally fine under that code, so.
okay, we're still back to that.
Just my opinion, I'm thinking that I'm comfortable with this the way it is. The pits we're after to clean up now are those old ones that they just dug a hole in the ground and they got maybe a slab in the bottom or some clay, and those can be a mess if they aren't cleaned up. And we don't want to, I don't think we want to give them an excuse of a bill to pay in addition to not clean it up. And the other ones are, I don't know. This is something we can take up every year. So this is just a 12-month decision.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the newer ones aren't, like you were saying, Bernie, it's gonna be down the road, so the point is, you usually wanna set the fees prior to the problem coming.
Yeah, we have yet to abandon anything
Right.
with a full concrete or plastic liner,
Right.
so. And, you know, it was about 2004 when the 313 standard was updated to such a point that Waupaca County soils don't really meet for clay liner. I mean, since 2004, I think we've done maybe 2 clay lined pits out of all the structures we've built. And then after the next revision in 09, I think the number is 0. So there's virtually no chance we're ever going to do an earthen construction here anymore. It's always going to be concrete or plastic. So I mean, I think Bernie's onto something here. Like you said, at some point, a few years up the road, we're going to start to see some decommission of some of these things we built in the 2000s that were concrete but don't meet the standards of 2025 or 2030. So
When they take something like that down, how much do they have to remove all the concrete or just punch a hole in the bottom of it?
yeah, right now, all they have to do is punch a hole in the bottom to let water flow through. They don't have to remove all the concrete. So, and again, we've never done one yet, so I don't know. I mean, if I was a landowner, I'd probably want to get rid of the concrete that was at the top of the structure so you could level out some of the earth. You know, part of the abandonment standard says we have to have a 1% slope on top of it, so it can't be flat or it can't be a depression when we're done.
What happens when they use a lot of foundry sand?
Same thing. I mean, they still have to punch a hole in the bottom of it. The foundry sand standard, the DNR 538 standard, requires 2 feet of native soil over the top of the foundry sand, or a blacktop or a concrete or something else. Then you don't have to have the 2 feet. But so you either have to have an impervious surface or 2 feet of native soil. So that would be different if you abandon a pit by filling it with foundry sand. That top 2 feet would have to be something with a 1% slope made out of native soil.
So if your desire is just to approve this as is, and like a few of you stated, we're gonna look at it every year anyway. That's fine. You know, in my mind, it always comes up, and don't get me wrong, I'm from a farm, I'm for farmers and everything else. But the first time when I paid for it with Machi's up by Burnhamwood there and saw about 2 to 3 acres under concrete. It's like, oh my gosh, whatever happened, you know? Now, maybe there's some company that come out there and recycle concrete. I don't know. It's gonna cost money. Anyway, what's your desire?
Well, I'm good with it, whatever the committee decides to do. I just, I don't want to disincentive,
Right.
make a disincentive for cleaning up the ones that we know are the issue at the moment. So,
Okay, Greg, what are you gonna say? You gonna make a motion?
Make a motion that we leave everything until next year.
Is there a second?
second.
Any further discussion? A good discussion. Call the question. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
I,
Thank you.
Okay. And then moving on to the last one, which is our grants. So if you recall, we did amend this in September last year for these bottom 2 black lines, because we had a large scale trim grant, which operates much more like these DATCAP grants do versus the small scale trim grant with respect to how much work staff has into them. We added that as a 5%. And then we had that harvestable buffer grant from DATCAP, $50,000 for this year. We added as a 5%. It's looking like, I know DATCAP wants to do more of these in the future, so I think we'll see more of that. And then just after considering things that we don't have spelled out completely here, if you recall, we now have this multi-discharger variance money, which is the money that the private, so we get, right now we get 2 payments a year. One is from the Poisippi Sewer District, because we have part of that in Wapaka County. The other one is from Hillshire Farms. So the 2 of those amounted to like $8,000 this year that we have available for cost share on DNR projects at 70%. So we hadn't used any of that to date. We're actually probably going to use some of it here real shortly. So I added that on. I mean, there's 2 thoughts here. One, the workload, paperwork, various stuff is about the same as all of our other grants. I guess the only other thing you may want to consider here with respect to a fee is that this is not government money. This is private money that these entities are paying in lieu of them having to do something like a brick and mortar or higher dollar chemical treatments to either their sewage plants or their, in Hillshire's case, their discharge, whatever they're discharging into the Wolf there. So, you know, does this warrant a fee? Is it any different because it's private money and versus government money? I'll leave that for you to decide.
So just for clarification again on that buffer grant, so Clinton's would have paid that 5%, right?
Yep.
Irregardless whether it's 50,000, 100,000.
Right. So Clinton's and Seward's were put in this spring. Seward, I actually already made the payment to, and he paid the 5% because that's why we brought that up in September, because
Right.
those payments were coming up. Clinton's payment will probably go out this week. And then we've got the rest of that money coming up here under our contracts for the third one that won't get paid out till next year. It'll get carried over. But.
So your real question is that red line?
Yeah, the real question, the only addition here is the red line on the bottom. You know, do we want to charge 5% for the MDV monies or not? You know, I probably could have made the case. Well, yeah, we really didn't have anything. That's DNR funding, not DATCAP, or it's a DNR program. Again, it's not state money, it's private money. I don't know that matters, but I just thought if we're going to charge, because we're about to have our first cost share job with this money coming up, that we better spell it out on paper or not, so.
I think you got good justification on your 5%, being that's what you're basing your others on.
Yeah, it's, you know, this is for the same kind of jobs we're doing with the other grants. Sediment control basins or waterways or diversions or whatever. We can even use it for buffers if we need to, so it's all the same from our standpoint.
So what we're doing here is helping them in a way to comply by them going through this program instead of them having to shell out a whole lot of money to upgrade a sewage treatment plant one way, shape, form, or another.
Yeah, the MDV variance was passed by the state lawmakers, would have been in 2017, I think, because it became the first money we saw or anybody saw from the program was for the very end of 2018. But it's a statewide program that's in place for 10 years, and then the lawmakers would have to look at it again.
Yeah, because that was really a big item, because municipality like Marion or Clintonville have come up with millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
There was other ways of trying to mitigate it coming from the farmland.
Right. So a lot of it has to do with the size of the municipality. You know, Green Bay, I think, needed to build a $25 million structure, but the size of Green Bay, they just looked at it and said, yeah, we need to do that. Big deal. Well, if the city of Marion has to build a $1.2 million structure, that's probably a much bigger deal to their tax base than 25 million is to Green Bay. So
Oh, yeah, and in some of these small towns, they're kind of right on the cutoff line of whether they gotta do it or not. And that buys them 10 years.
and that's exactly what it does, is it just buys them time. It doesn't exempt them from having to make those changes. It just buys them time to do it. So
All the other programs, the DNR, the DAC is involved, and they're going out and researching what it is that they've got for runoff or discharge. Now here on the DNR, are the municipalities supplying them with the information? So they're already doing the work. So should we be double charging them for the work that they're doing to?
DNR doesn't, well, the only work DNR has into MDV would be on the wastewater end of it and the permit issuance. So it's just like we were talking about our manure storage permits, you know, DNR's got a whole division that issues permits to these point source runoff facilities. So that's their workload. I mean, otherwise the workload for the practice, to give you an example, we've got two water and sediment control basins going in on a landowner up on West River Road that we intend to use this funding to cost share right now. So for us, it's the same project, just a different source of money for the cost share. The rates are all the same. We have to follow DNR 70%. We have to use DNR contracts, the same as we would do for the large and small scale trim grants. From my standpoint, our workload is no different.
Okay, what's your wish? To add this, or?
I'll move to add the bottom line that's in red, the DNR multi-discharge or variance grant to the fee schedule at the 5% amount.
And approve the rest of the schedule.
And approve the rest as is.
I would second that.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a couple of new cost share contracts. Water and sediment control basin for Dick Piaski for approximately $6,200. The MDV basins that I was just telling you about for Andy and Emily Hiddle, $7,800. And then our last remaining buffer money, which is about just over $6,300 left from the DATCAP grant, 2 harvestable buffers on Jeff Henschel's property. So 6,300. So those are the 3 newest contracts we need a motion for.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve those. And I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Maybe just before I call the question for the new people, do you understand pretty much how this is working?
A little bit.
I don't want to have you vote yes and you didn't know what you're talking about.
These would just be our typical cost share projects, Ken, that we do. Both DATCAP for certain, DNR likes to too. You know, technically this committee is supposed to approve all of the contracts we do. So these are our normal contracts. You will at times see some for very large amounts, like those small scale trim grants are now $225,000 grants, usually for waste storage for a single farm. In this case, these are what we refer to as smaller projects. They're all for erosion control of field erosion. So if you remember a month or 2 ago, I showed you that video of the basin we built. We do a lot of that this time of year, a lot of basins go in.
I was just curious on the Jeff Henschel property, which property is it? Is it the one over, is it the one over by?
Some on both.
by
So
Manure?
first of all, it's land that's in the Bear Lake watershed because his main farm is just outside of the Bear Lake watershed. But there's a field right on the corner of N and Green Valley Road, south of his farm. That's in, so there's some harvestable buffers going in there. And then over on in the town of Union, trying to think of what that little town road is there. Is it Beaver Road or he's got some land there. I think it's part of the old Dolman farm with some harvestable buffers on there too.
Okay, and the only difference with this is, and some of the things that Lisa does very secretive. She can't tell any name.
We're just the opposite. We need a formal approval. So.
And the harvestable buffers are basically just grasslands. I mean, there's.
Yeah, that's cropland along a ditch that's going to be planted into grass, usually somewhere around a 60-foot swath on either side. And it's still considered farmland, except that we now have this 10-year contract for it to remain in grass.
And they can't work the soil up. They can no-till it, but they can't
Yeah,
work
they
it.
likely won't till it at all unless we need them to overseed it to get a plant population back up. They will probably take a feed or a hay cutting off of it twice, maybe 3 times a year if they get lucky. Most of these spots are spots that are too wet to probably get in your typical first crop time frame, late May. What we saw with Seward and Clinton this year was that they got out later in June and were able to get a cutting. And then when it dried up, they were able to get a couple cuttings this summer. Might be some years where they don't, depending on the rainfall. Marginal, it's kind of a lot like CRP, marginal ground that they want to get something off of it, but it's in a critical area from our standpoint, and grass buffer is far better than them trying to slop around growing corn in it every year.
And hopefully some of this will prevent them with trees growing up, and then they gotta come in there and dig it all up.
Right.
Any other questions for a call? Call the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, so just a few other things that are going on. Like I said, the fall has been good here. We actually started a couple more jobs last week that normally we wouldn't be starting jobs on the 1st of December, but we're going to get a couple more basins in with the weather outlook here yet, which is good because, summer was kind of slow between COVID and the nervousness of prices before the payments that Jake talked about came out, before the money came out. We weren't getting a whole lot done in our normal early part of the construction season. And now all of a sudden, I can't remember December, we've had so much going on. So, we got probably 4 or 5 jobs going on today right now yet, so, which is good. Otherwise, we've got, Lisa talked about the EQIP sign up. A handful of those jobs are our staff doing the designs, with some early January deadlines for the program. So, the guys are both out in the field and trying to get back on the computer to get a few things done here before the second week of January. And then again, I'll have to get our MDV application in by the end of the month if we're going to continue to take that money. We don't have to take it. County's going to opt out. I don't see any reason to opt out. I kind of cuts the program out a little bit when I'm doing the paperwork, but it's there. I had higher hopes for it. I thought, well, FACTA would get more out of it. The money is really determined by how many of these facilities you have in the watershed that your county is located in. And for us, we're upstream of the valley, so there's not as much available. But, and then when we're done here, the HR committee meets later this morning, and we'll talk there about the position we talked about last month, getting that rolling. And we've got quite a bit of payments to get out here for those cover cropping contracts in Bear Lake. So get those out by the end of the year, probably $100,000 worth of that going out the door. That's all I have. The management team continues to meet every Thursday on the phone, and it's mostly dominated about coronavirus things. So.
And we'll go on for quite a while. It's hard to believe, but the next meeting will be in 2021. I don't remember when January.
Looks like the first Monday is the 4th, Dwayne.
8 o'clock still work for anybody?
Yep.
Well, it was dark this morning.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I get up, it's like, what happened? No moon?
Cloudy, right, yeah.
31 degrees.
Yeah, I'll take it.
I like it.
The motion to adjourn.
Make that motion. Second.
We are adjourned.
Brian, do you have any update on the
Good Christmas. And
You too.
Friendship Valley up there when they had that hose break last year, and you said that the DNR was gonna take care of that? And
I think the DNR largely let them off the hook on that one. That was the gist I got at the time, and I have not heard any more about it since. So
yeah, I haven't heard anything.
I think, DNR, I've been in this situation with them a few times.